What you see behind me is a lie. Now, this is a real image put out by the White House, and these are real tariffs that the US wants to put forward, but there is a very serious lie here that we need to discuss. That is tariffs charged to the US, including currency manipulation and trade barriers. You see these numbers here look really, really high, and that's a very, very simple reason. These are not true. These are not actually tariffs that are against America. These numbers are not real. Now, if you need a good example of that, there's actually another image here. And if we go and look, you'll see that the tariffs from the Heard and McDonald Islands to the United States is 10%, which is wild because these are uninhabited islands that only penguins live on. So you might be wondering, where are they getting this number from? This man appeared to crack the case, just figured out where these fake tariff rates come from. They didn't actually calculate tariff rates plus non-tariff barriers as they say they did. Instead, for every country, they just took our trade deficit with that country and divided it by the country's exports to us. So we have a 17.9 billion trade deficit with Indonesia. It exports to us our 28 billion. 17.9 divided by 28 equals 64, which Trump claims is the tariff rate Indonesia charges us. What extraordinary nonsense is this? And this got a government reply. The White House Deputy Press Secretary says, no, we literally calculated tariff and non-tariff barriers. Oh boy, this is going to be fun. So this is an official government page listing out the formula to disprove that man's claim. So let's take a look here. It looks pretty impressive, right? They got some letters and definitely some Greek letters. It's definitely confusing for the average American, which is the point. But there's something very important here. Right here, they have this part, and I've added this to a paint program so I can show you, because this is what's important. This Greek symbol here is a 4. That's what they've decided to set it as. And this Greek symbol that I'm about to get for you here is set at 0.25. So, that is these two symbols together. These two symbols. 4 times 0.25 just happens to be 1. And if you multiply by 1, you can basically just get rid of it because it doesn't do anything. And would you look at this? You end up with the exact same formula that the guy claimed they did that was done incorrectly. So either the man who made the statement from his government account doesn't know what he actually linked to because it proves that, or he knows he's lying. Now you might be wondering, why do the penguins have a 10% tariff and why does it say they give a 10% tariff to us? Because to act strong, they just put a 10% minimum. But if you want to get a little conspiracy minded, things actually might take an even darker turn. So people decided to ask multiple AI programs, what would be an easy way to calculate the tariffs that should be imposed on other countries so that the US is on an even playing field when it comes to trade deficit, set minimum at 10%. And the formula that the AI comes up with is essentially the same. It's basically the same way. You will get the same numbers. So there's a worry that whoever was put in charge of this just ran it through some AI program to come up with something, and then maybe had that AI program tell them where to add the Greek letters to make it look more fancy and professional. That's a little frightening, because at the end of the day, even if this part here, it's a little conspiracy minded, right? Maybe they didn't do that, but Elon loves his AI and he pushes it on Trump. If that didn't happen, that still means that every statement from the White House when it's come to how these were calculated was a lie, and their own government website shows how they did the math, which proves that they were not telling the truth. So when people were oohing and awing at these high tariffs against America, it wasn't true. They took trade deficits. And guess what? If you don't like a $5,000 iPhone and you don't want a $500 pair of Nike shoes, then you're going to want trade deficits like that. That's just how a global economy works. It's different goods being sold because, get this, developing countries and other countries aren't buying American furniture and things like that. That's why there's a trade deficit. And America is a land of consumers that like cheap goods, whether you like it or not. It's pretty wild. It's pretty wild because the numbers aren't true. Remember, the penguins are not tariffing us 10%. And you can see the base 10% very easy. Again, what is behind me is a official White House image. I want to make that clear. I took this directly myself from the White House Twitter page. So there's no question there. This is what they put out. You can go find this yourself. You can do the math yourself because it's not actually hard. In fact, the math is so easy, people were able to immediately guess how it was done. And these tariffs, let's see here, this one has some numbers. Like, let's take an actual look and think about it. Think about how this is going to affect your prices you pay. China, 34%. And I want to be clear. From my understanding, from a journalist who asked about this, from someone at the White House, this 34% tariff, these are on top of current tariffs, which I think there's already 20% on China. So it's 54% essentially. European Union, 20%. Well, the 20% I believe is what Trump's planning, so it's 54. Then we have Vietnam, 46. Taiwan, 32. Japan, 24. India, 26. South Korea, 25. And you might be wondering, well, what is the result of this, right? How does this end up? Well, what's happened is Asian countries that do not get along, China, South Korea, possibly, I could see North Korea getting involved if the US cuts off their aid. But China, South Korea, Japan, etc., all don't get along, are going to come together. We know they're doing this for talks of possible free trade agreements. That is crazy. And then who else is wanting to meet with them? Well, there's a planned meeting with all of those countries and more with the European Union because they want to bypass America. And the only way Trump can try to take advantage of that, I assume, would be to invade Panama, take over the Panama Canal, and start trying to charge money for other countries. But then, yet again, let's get a little conspiracy-minded here. With global warming and climate change, there is a very noticeable drop in ice as you go north, permanent ice, which means there could be new trade routes opening up, which would go around Canada and pass the waters of Greenland to other countries that Trump is focused on. And all these tariffs that are supposed to affect the auto industry, from my understanding, go into effect by the time you watch this video. I believe it's going to affect at midnight, so it's already in effect by the time I recorded this. There's some more, I think, on the 5th and more on the 9th. I might have those dates a little wrong, but somewhere around there. And when these prices go up with these goods, let's say something is done, because remember, these aren't real tariff numbers, right? So if the White House claims a win and goes, well, look, now the tariffs are lower when they always were, the prices, if good prices gets raised, you've seen from COVID, when prices went up and the supply chains got cheaper, items got cheaper, supply came back, the prices didn't really go back down, did they? And when they talk about, well, one of the complaints I saw today from a political analyst on Fox News, we need to tariff Europe because they won't buy our chicken. They won't buy our beef. Well, they won't buy our beef because we treat everything inhumanely and it's so packed full of antibiotics it's not legal. And our chicken, if you didn't know, is put through a chemical bath that is not allowed in the European Union. That's why they don't have our chicken. And we have to do that because of the unsanitary conditions we keep chickens in here, which leads to issues like bird flu, causing massive egg disruption. Just so many. And the question is, like, what do you want these places to do, right? Madagascar, a 47% tariff on Madagascar. What do you want them to buy from us to, like, increase that number? Because there's a trade deficit. That's all this is. It's not a tariff. It's a trade deficit. I wasn't even going to make a video on it, but the more I looked into it, I wasn't even home when these hit. But the more you look into it, it's wild. It's wild. And I decided to look at specifically Japan because Japan, you might be like, well, why is their trade deficit so big? Well, the yen is weak. So it takes more of their currency to buy things from America. That's why there's such a deficit, right? And while they're having those issues, Trump's threatening trade wars that now are just going to hurt Americans. Like, even like business news on like conservative networks are like, think about when your 401k goes down, when your retirement goes down, think about it being for the war effort. Because, you know, Americans absolutely, in general, they love when they're told, like, the war in Vietnam, the war in the Middle East, those type, like, wars have definitely had a great track record, right? And what's funny is this level of tariffs is the highest we've had, I think, ever. New taxes. But what's crazy is these style of ideas happens about every 100 years. And every time it leads to a recession, into a little depression. Why every 100 years? Well, someone made a comment that makes sense. You gotta wait till everyone else who actually experienced it dies off before you're stupid enough to try it again. So, I'm happy that my computer broke when it did, because I needed a new one. And from my understanding, the car tariffs are also affecting things in such a way that it's going to be hitting computers, including laptops and desktops. So thankfully I got that done when I did. And I hope any of you that needed big purchases got them done in time. Now, if you're wondering, how does America solve this, right? Well, the answer would be to get rid of the tariffs. You're not going to convince Trump to do that. So how do you do that? He only has the power to do this because Congress granted that extra power to the president. So Congress could technically come together and take it back. And that would solve this. That would solve all the tariff issues instantly. Are they willing to do that? At least not right now. If we get closer to midterms and they're looking like a bloodbath, maybe. I mean, Wisconsin, they thought they were going to win a Supreme Court seat and they didn't. And that's probably terrifying. So we know some people, like some representatives in that state, are very worried now. So I don't think it's going to help MAGA numbers when prices go up. And they're going to. And tomorrow, I expect to see the stock market in not a great place. I expect to see certain layoffs. I already have a couple friends who have been preemptively told that, how do I want to put this? Their bosses have basically said, depending on how things shake out, there might need to be layoffs. Because remember, it's not just raw goods, it's also the materials to make goods in America that are being tariffed. So I just hope everyone's okay. I hope all my viewers are okay. That's all I can hope for.